So thanks everyone for coming to today's meeting. Today we're going to be talking about gap years and whether one is right for you before entering into medical school. And if you do take a gap year, how you can kind of use that year or years to be a more competitive applicant and successfully matriculate into med school. So the purpose of a gap year is to take a year away from school, and you can use that in multiple ways, either to take more time to study and prepare for the MCAT and for the med school application process. It can also be used as an opportunity to improve on any weaknesses you may have in your application, or just expand on the strengths that make you a good applicant. And you can also take time away from just being in school, being around academia before you get started on medical school, because obviously that's going to be a very long and taxing journey. So you want to make sure you're in a good mental state before you start school. So a big misconception around gap years is that you're going to be off track or everybody's going to be ahead of you. So we wanted to just look at the data and see how common is a gap year. And as we can see here, gap years are actually becoming more and more common. So in 2014, about 42% of people were not taking gap year. So still over half of people were taking gap years. But now when we go to 2018, even less. So only around 37% are not taking gap year. So the vast majority of people are taking gap year, and this data is coming from the AAMC website. It's coming from a questionnaire of successful matriculants. So they also did a question on what people have been doing during their gap year. So a lot of people were able to work and save money. A lot of people, almost about 50% did research. So obviously that's a big option during your gap year. Some people went on and pursued graduate studies. Other people just did their pre-med requirements for the first time. So another thing we want to emphasize during this meeting is how you can use that year just to really improve on being a good applicant. And to do that, we kind of have to look at what are schools considering when they're evaluating you for acceptance. So most schools have some form of holistic review where they look at not just your metrics, but also your experiences and attributes. So your experiences can be research experience, community service, leadership, exposure to healthcare, or just life experiences. Your attributes are like your values, whether you're mature enough to become a doctor. Are you actually interested in pursuing information? Do you have enough intellectual curiosity to be a good doctor? So it's really looking at the things that make you you, and if they'll all contribute to you being a good doctor. They also look at diversity to make sure they're bringing together a class of students that's not all coming from the same background, so that patients are able to get the best care possible. And then, of course, they're going to look at your GPA and your MCAT and the trends of your grades to determine if you have what it takes to be successful in a med school curriculum. So it's important to note that they don't just look at your GPA. Although they look at your cumulative GPA, they also look at your grade trends. So let's say you had a rough first year. You started off with like a 2.0 GPA, but then around third and fourth year, you were able to bring it up a lot. They'll see that as a sign of growth. So that'll definitely help your chances in getting in. And then how do they evaluate these things? Obviously metrics, they can just look at your MCAT score or your official transcripts. For your attributes, they're going to look more at your letters of evaluation, at your personal statement, and of course at your interview. A lot of schools also do a social media search, and they do a criminal history search. And then for your experiences, you'll be listing a lot of them in your work and activities and when you're filling out your primary application. So what options do you have for your gap year? So a lot of this depends on what your strengths and weaknesses are. So some people will pursue a master's program like an NPH. Other people will go for a special master's or a med school matriculation program. Lots of people will do research fellowships. You can do service, you can do more clinical experiences. Some people weren't able to finish all their prereqs during their 4 years of undergrad, or maybe they just figured out they wanted to become a doctor after they finished undergrad and they're going kind of a non-traditional route. So a lot of students will take that time just to finish up prereqs. But yeah, it's also a good time to save up money, so you're well equipped to go into medical school. You may have to retake the MCAT. Doing that during your gap year gives you more time to study, so that's always good. And then you can also take time for yourself and just to enjoy life, because once you get to med school, you're going to be really focused on that, so you might not have the time to do all the things that you want to do. So definitely taking time to do something for yourself during your gap year is very important. So the first option we want to talk about is the Special Master's Program. So basically the Special Master's Program is specifically designed for pre-med students who are looking to increase their competitiveness. So this is probably the best way that you have to recover from a low undergrad GPA. So if you are someone who has a lower undergrad GPA and you're worried, oh, I don't know what I can do now, I don't know if I'll be able to get into medical school because they'll see my application and they'll just throw it out because my GPA isn't competitive enough. Programs like a Special Master's Program are really helpful because basically you get to reset. You'll be doing coursework that is similar to med school curriculum. And if you're able to succeed in this program, then it really shows med schools that you have what it takes to meet their academic challenges. And it also better prepares you for the courses that you'll be taking in med school, since they're very similar. So again, the benefits are to boost your GPA, to prove you can handle the med school rigor, and lots of Special Master's programs also have a component that's focused on the MCAT. So if you have a lower MCAT score, you can also work towards improving that. Going along with Special Master's programs, there are also some direct matriculation programs, like the one at Ohio State. That's called the MedPath program. So basically how that works is you would apply to Ohio State's med school, and if you are just below the cutoff point, but you still are a strong applicant, they would be able to defer you into the MedPath program. And if you're accepted into that, you would be doing a program that would be very similar to the Special Master's Program. You would be completing different courses that are similar to medical school, but that the MedPath program specifically has a larger focus on really improving your MCAT score, so you're a more competitive applicant for the second time. And if you're able to successfully complete this program, then you are granted conditional acceptance into Ohio State's College of Medicine. So that's a really great program. You can also go about your gap year by getting a Master's of Public Health. So MPH programs focus specifically on subjects like biostatistics, epidemiology, and injury prevention. So those are all touched on in medical school, but they're not gone into as in-depth. So getting an MPH is definitely something that's very valuable to give you more perspective on the different diseases that you may face as a doctor. So although it might not have the same focus on like the hard sciences that you may need to improve your GPA in, this is still helpful because it will make you a better doctor. Two doctors at Ohio State that have MPHs and are doing great work in community health are Dr. Gray and Dr. Joseph, and they do a lot of work with the American Male Wellness Initiative. So an MPH degree can kind of just better prepare you to do community health work and research. So a research fellowship is also another option for your gap year. Obviously, research is a huge part of the medical field, and it's very attractive to not only med schools, but also residency programs for a candidate to have research coming in. So being able to demonstrate that you can work on a team, you can successfully solve a research question is very attractive. It helps you build your resume, and it prepares you for future research experiences. And then another option is to have a service gap year. So some students don't have time to devote themselves to service in undergrad, but service is very important because being a doctor is a service profession. So schools want to make sure that you do have a heart for service and you do care about others. So being able to show more service experience is very valuable. So there are a few different avenues that you can go about doing that. Some students go into AmeriCorps. There's also a President's Prize at OSU, which is open to all graduating seniors, and they'll give you a living stipend, and then they'll also give you financial support for a service project that you're passionate about. And then you can also volunteer with local nonprofits just to get in that service. So another option is to have a clinical gap year. Med schools want to make sure that that you know what you're getting into when you go into medicine. So having clinical experience is a good way to show that you know what it takes to be what it takes to be a physician. You know what that life entails, and that you enjoy it, because it's always better to know early on that medicine is or is not for you, rather than getting into med school and then deciding later on, yeah, I really don't like this, and now you've wasted your time, but you've also taken up a spot from someone else who could have had that. So some examples of how you could gain that experience are by working as a PCA at a hospital, working as an EMT, a clinical scribe, or working as a free clinical volunteer. The free clinical volunteering is also an opportunity we have through MAPS. So definitely get in contact with someone on the e-board if that's something you're interested in. And since we're in Columbus, there are tons of opportunities to get clinical experience either at Mount Carmel, Nationwide, the Wexner Medical Center, Grant Hospital. So definitely if you're interested in becoming a PCA or an EMT, reach out and we can get you connected with those opportunities. So before we go into our panel, I just wanted to provide some final thoughts. A lot of people get discouraged, especially when dealing with the tough science courses or dealing with the stress of taking the MCAT, and they're like, oh, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it. But a quote that has really been impactful for me, I think a medical student said it to me during my freshman year. It was, if you're passionate about medicine, the question is not if you'll become a doctor, but when. And I think that really stuck with me because there are so many options for things that you can do. If you're not a competitive applicant for this cycle, then you can always take a gap year. You could do a special master's program. You could do more research. You could do more clinical hours. There's always something that you can do. So if you are really passionate about medicine, I definitely wouldn't give up. There are so many options